Hey guys, and welcome to MashUp Games. For the indie and solo game developers out there, it is likely you have heard of an event called Ludum Dare. And for those who haven't, let me explain. Ludum Dare is an online game jam event that happens on average twice a year, and is considered to be the world's largest online game jam. Because of its popularity, it ends up getting hundreds or even thousands of entries every time. I had heard of Ludum Dare about a year ago, and thought it would be something I'd want to do. But for ages it had fallen off my radar, until a couple of weeks ago. The 44th Ludum Dare was coming up, and by chance it was at a time when I had loads of free time, so I thought I would enter it. Ludum Dare is split into two categories, Compo and Jam. Jam is where you can participate by yourself or in a team, and you have a 72-hour time frame to make and submit a game. Compo is where you can only participate solo, and you have a shorter time of 48 hours. This is considered the hard mode of Ludum Dare, and it is what I entered. So welcome to the making of Protect the Dungeon for Ludum Dare 44. A thing common with game jams is that they tend to have a theme. The theme this time was chosen with people submitting their own idea, then the public would vote on themes they like. The theme was to be released at 2 AM, but I planned instead to get a good night's sleep and start in the morning. So I got up and checked my Twitter to find out the theme was, Your Life is Currency. Now I can say with confidence after hearing other people's thoughts online that this was indeed a bad theme. Most people had no idea what to do, and it didn't spark any ideas. But luckily for me, I had an idea. I had been thinking about what sort of game I would like to make before the game jam, and when I was reading through the themes and the voting, an idea came to me that wouldn't leave. Unfortunately enough, this idea would work with a theme, so here was my idea. You play as a boss monster of a dungeon. You're fed up with heroes always coming to kill you, and they won't stop coming because there's a huge bounty reward that's been set on your head. So to stop these heroes, you have to manage your own dungeon by adding rooms and monsters to stop the ongoing onslaught of heroes. You get money whenever you kill a hero, and this money you can use to further add more monsters and rooms. But once a hero enters your room, it's game over. This fits the theme in more ways than one. People want to take your life to get currency. You kill the people, and in exchange for their lives, you get currency. You create life in the monsters, with currency. And so, with an idea to work with, and 38 hours left, I had a game to make. First I made the art for a dungeon room, one that is simple and can be adjusted in height. Then I drew a little hero character, one that will come walking through the dungeon. As there was little time to make a full game, I decided to make the art simple and cartoonish, and after animating the hero character, I started feeling very optimistic about this game. I didn't want every hero to look the same, so I drew different bodies and different heads. Then, after writing up a script for random sprite choosing and assignments, I had the basic game layout set up with a maximum of 14 rooms, though this number of rooms would change later on. Something I was slightly worrying about was how the player was going to move through the rooms, though this ended up easier than I thought when I started making it. Adding a sprite mask to each room means that the hero is only visible within the room, and just by applying a constant velocity to the player allows the player to move forwards. I also added a bit of UI, including a button that allows the player to add more rooms. The next thing I added was the enemies. I didn't want the final boss room to be empty, so I drew up a final boss monster that just sits in the final room. Using a simple square sprite to represent an enemy, I changed the player script so that the player will detect when an enemy is in front of it. If so, the hero will stop moving and attack the enemy until it is dead. If not, then the player will continue moving forward. Of course, the enemy cannot just stand there and be a damaged sponge without attacking the player too, and so came about the first enemy, the skeleton. After adding a quick few animations to it, I added the skeleton to the game. Like how the player will attack the skeleton will also attack the player back. And so ended day 1 as I went to sleep for the night. Having a good night's sleep, I woke up with 17 hours left to make my game, not feeling at all worried about getting a playable game at the end. And the first thing I added in the morning was a health bar. It felt unfair if, when managing your dungeon, one of your enemies dies at a random time without you ever knowing when, because you can't see how much health they have left. So I added a health bar above each enemy that will update whenever the enemy gets hit. And already this made the game look nicer, and it felt more capable of the user to have better insight of their management. After adding the same health bar to the heroes, the main thing I needed to sort out was enemy placement. The idea of rooms and upgrading was that a room can initially hold 1 enemy, but can be upgraded up until it can hold a maximum of 3 enemies. For the while, I made a skeleton already exist when you added a room, but then I started to code a draggable button. When you drag from the button, it will spawn a sprite of the enemy to add that will stick under your mouse until you drop it, at which point, if your mouse is at a point where the enemy can be placed, the enemy will be spawned. Having skeletons is great and all, but if you only add skeletons, it makes the game a little boring. So then came around the second monster of the game, goblins. I quickly animated the goblin and added that into the game. The difference between the skeleton and the goblin is that the goblin has a higher health and it deals more damage. Though later on, I also decided to make the goblin only unlock once the player has reached the 5th round, as to make the player start only using skeletons to the point where, when the goblin becomes available, the player will want to use them. At this point, I also had a currency system in place, so you will be rewarded currency for each hero you kill, which you can then spend on more enemies and rooms. While this was easy to add, it was probably the hardest thing to do, as you then have to consider balancing your game. Just like how each round will add 5 more heroes spawned, and the spawn time between them would be reduced. While I originally had the idea of an upgrade room button on the right that will, when clicked, show a click room to upgrade screen, where you then click on the room to upgrade, this then changed to a UI button on each room that will let you directly upgrade the room. At this point, I only had 6 hours left. While there were a few things I could have added in this time, there were essentials I wanted done, which were adding one last monster, making the main menu, adding the pause menu, making a game over screen, and adding sound and music. However, I was also going round to my girlfriend's in the evening, so I quickly added one more enemy before heading over, the demon. The demon again has a higher health and attack power, but can only be unlocked by round 10. Once I had drawn the demon, added animations and implemented it into the game, I took a break. Still, with a planned 3 hours and 30 minutes left to work on the game, I was not worrying about getting it done. The only problem was, not everything goes to plan. By the time I got back home, I had lost track of time a bit and only left myself with 2 hours left. While this was not detrimental to me getting the game done, it did mean I had to take some shortcuts. Instead of adding a pause menu, I quickly came up with a pause button. This button allows you to pause the game at any point, which not only allows players to pause the game if they need to step away for a bit, but also allows players to remain more in control of their dungeon in stressful times rather than relying on quick reflexes, as players are allowed to add rooms and enemies during the pause. The main menu was not hard to add, since I had made so many menus before, but I kept it simple and only had a panel that read the title, had some basic info on the side such as my channel, and a play and exit button. For the game over screen, I simply had a panel that stated game over and how many rounds the player survived for. With most of the things done, all I had left to do was add sound and music. But I had also spent a little bit of time playtesting and balancing the game, which resulted in only 40 minutes left. There was no time to add sound. So at that point, I decided to cut my losses and built the game. Debugging took up another 20 minutes, and then after doing minute details, I managed to get my game submitted with 10 seconds left. It was all over. And so, I had participated in my first ever Ludum Dare. The experience was fun, and I'm really happy that I had a good idea and was able to pull it off. The game is a little bare, and more mechanics and balancing would have made the game a lot more enticing and fun for the player to play, but it's nothing that can't be done in the future if I want to revisit this. If you want to play the game and also rate it, that will really help, then the link is in the description below. And if you want to join the MashUp Games Discord server, you can also find that link down below. I hope you have enjoyed this video as much as I have enjoyed making it, and if you have, then like and subscribe. This is MashUp Games, signing out.